Hello, everybody. So, welcome back to Gentlemen for Cinephiles. It has been a very long time, and I'm so excited to be back. Now, before we get into today's topic, I just kind of want to go over a little bit of housekeeping things as to what is coming up for the podcast. So, first and foremost, I am actually the only host on the podcast for now. Charlie and I have been separated for the past couple weeks, and I'm going to just take over the podcast. He's going to be making content on his YouTube channel, The Young Mystic, so you can follow him there if you want to keep up with what he's doing, because I know he's going to post some pretty awesome film analysis, film deep dive stuff. So, if you want to hear his opinion on movies you'll still be able to. But for the podcast, we're going to be uploading on Tuesdays and Thursdays. And where you can find us is still the same. So that's Gentlemen for Cinephiles on Instagram, on Facebook, and on Twitter. Our website is gentlemenforcinephiles.net. And we are hosted on Buzzsprout, so you can listen on YouTube, Spotify, and iTunes. Now, as for team members, my amazing friend Evelyn is running our social media, and she's the only other team member on the podcast. You might have remembered her from our Halloween special, where we watched through all the Friday the 13th movies. She was on that. And as for quality, right now I'm recording in our college library, so if it looks like I'm in a creepy room on YouTube, I am. I'm working on a studio in my apartment, and that'll be ready in the next couple of weeks, so we'll slowly transition and move there. But yeah, so moving into today's topic, I've wanted to talk about it for a very, very long time, and I feel like not a lot of people are really discussing it, even though I think it's a very important discussion that should be had. And now that's the idea of who should be allowed to win an Oscar, who should be allowed to be nominated for an Oscar. Last month, there was quite a bit of drama between the Academy of Motion Picture Arts and Sciences and the Department of Justice, actually. So we're going to kind of go into that. I'm going to give you kind of a brief overview of the situation that went down. And then I'm going to kind of give my opinion and discuss through some, hypocrisies that I'm kind of seeing. Some hypocrisies I'm seeing in this kind of new age of independent film, independent media. Because I do think the way we consume content, the way we consume film is changing very strongly, and it's becoming very evident that it's becoming very evident that a lot of people in the industry are scared of that, and I'm going to go over people who aren't scared of that as well. But so to just begin. Now, in late March, early April, Steven Spielberg actually came out with a couple of articles. I'm looking specifically at this one from Variety that I'll link down in the description box of the YouTube. So that was opening the discussion that Steven Spielberg and a couple other directors felt that Netflix-based films and Netflix-sponsored films and Hulu-sponsored films sponsored by streaming sites where people kind of consume television as well as movies, should be barred from the Academy of Motion Picture Arts and Sciences and should not be allowed to be nominated for things like Best Picture, any of the Oscar awards, because of, a definition technicality. There's this direct quote from Steven Spielberg where he says, "Once you commit to a television format, you're a TV movie. You certainly, if it's a good show, deserve an Emmy, but not an Oscar. I don't believe films that are just given token qualifications in a couple of theaters for less than a week should qualify for the Academy Award nomination." Now, to kind of go into what he says at the end, it is a requirement for Oscar-nominated films to, I believe for feature length, you have to have a theatrical release for at least a week, and for short films, you have to run for a weekend. It's something along those lines, but that's what he's referencing when he talks towards the end, because most of these films are generally streamed. They don't necessarily get a theatrical release unless they're, aiming to be nominated for an Academy Award. Now, furthermore, Dunkirk director Christopher Nolan, he also called Netflix's release plans bizarre and mindless and actually apologized for his comments later on. So this discussion kind of began and kind of saw a resurgence in the media when we're looking at the 2017 Cannes Film Festival, where a Netflix documentary, I believe it's called Okja, I'm not 100% sure how to pronounce it, but actually there was a lot of boos and there was a lot of upset that it was a Netflix movie being shown at a film festival. So I believe a lot of the anger from my perspective, just comes from this technicality, but we'll talk about that. We'll go into that a little bit later. So one day it came out that Steven Spielberg was going to submit this rule that Netflix films would not be eligible for the Academy of Motion Picture Arts and Sciences simply because of their TV movie status, as he wants to say. And then immediately the day after, actually, the Department of Justice weighed in very, very quickly and actually sent a letter to the Academy and pretty much just to summarize the full letter, he said that that would not be allowed and that the Department of Justice would quickly shut it down because it would suppress competition. Now, a direct quote from the Department of Justice is that in the event that the Academy, an association that includes multiple competitors in its membership, establishes certain eligibility requirements for the Oscars that eliminate competition without pro-competitive justification, such conduct may raise antitrust concerns. So, it would specifically, what is referenced here is the Sherman Act, which prohibits anti-competitive agreements among competitors. Now, if the Academy were to put in place this rule, it would be in direct violation of this act, and the Department of Justice would have to step in. So Steven Spielberg did not put in the request, and it's kind of just like gone by the wayside, and the discussions kind of fizzled out. But I think it's something really important to discuss. Now, I'm going to be completely apparent, completely overt. I have a lot of respect for Steven Spielberg with what he's done in the industry, but I will say I'm not the biggest fan of his filmmaking. I don't necessarily find myself wanting to watch a Steven Spielberg movie. I don't necessarily like many of his films. Now, I will just say that going into this discussion. Now, the first thing that I want to discuss is this whole idea of a new independent media push. Now, I think it's very interesting that Steven Spielberg is one of the, I guess, forerunners of anti-Netflix, anti-Hulu in this new independent climate, because Spielberg himself was, as many of you know, part of the film school generation, which a lot of people largely, I guess, define as one of the biggest first independent pushes in American cinema in particular. These were young students coming out of college, coming out of film school, producing their films independently and not backed by huge studios. When you're looking at Spielberg's work specifically, he's been kind of the poster child for the first independent boom that happened in the late film school generation. So I think it's very interesting that he doesn't quite understand this new independent media that's happening, because, I mean, I'm sure in his time the discussion and the argument was, wow, these films aren't studio backed in a traditional way, therefore they shouldn't be eligible for Oscars, they shouldn't be eligible for this and that. So you would think he'd cross-apply that to Netflix, to Hulu, to social media and the way films are consumed now. So you would think he'd cross-apply. I mean, just looking at another person in the film school generation, Martin Scorsese, like, he is making a Netflix movie right now. If you saw during the Academy Awards this year, the trailer for The Irishman, which is a Netflix-backed movie, was shown. And it looks amazing, and it's still a Martin Scorsese film. It's still as artistically valid as anything else. I mean, when we're looking at the idea of a TV movie, I think personally, when I'm thinking of a TV movie, I think of, Hallmark movies, I think of Lifetime movies, I think of made-for-TV films in, a broadcasting format, as opposed to the more cinematic approach that Netflix has taken to a lot of its films, or a lot of streaming sites have taken to their films. I don't think that this weird semantics issue should be at the forefront of the discussion. When we're looking at what films should be nominated for an Oscar, I mean, a Netflix film is as valid as a film that comes out in theaters. And if I want to get technical and kind of shady, like, under these auspices and under these assumptions, a film like the BFG would be more, I guess, worthy in Steven Spielberg's eyes of being nominated for an Oscar than something like Roma. So looking at it technically, it doesn't make any sense, because I'm not quite sure where Steven Spielberg drew these conclusions from. Because, I mean, looking at a lot of the films that go up for Academy Awards, or that have gotten Academy Awards, that are Netflix-based, they use the cinematic language in a way that is highly reminiscent and pushes the filmic form. These independent films are able to push the studio style and replicate the studio style while not being studio films, while being a new kind of independent film. boiling them down to TV movies just seems like really weird and wrong to me. So those are my thoughts and opinions about this little topic. I'm going to actually wrap it up about here for a little short and sweet episode to get us back into the swing of things. But I would love to know your opinion. You can hit me up on Gentlemen for Cinephiles' Instagram at Gentlemen for Cinephiles, or my own personal Instagram at _ Renaissance Woman. Let me know your opinion there. Like, do you think that Netflix movies are as worthy as studio-backed films and other, I guess, more traditional independent films? Do you think they're as eligible for Oscars? Do you think they're worthy of Oscars? That type of stuff? Or do you agree with Steven Spielberg? I'd love to know. So that's all for today, and I will see you guys on Thursday. I look forward to it. This new Gentlemen for Cinephiles format I'm pretty excited with, and I think it's going to be super fun. But yeah, I'll see you guys Thursday. Bye.